They took down my kids at play sign like it was some kind of eyesore. So I shut down the only shortcut their entire neighborhood depended on, and within a week, the whole place started unraveling in ways none of us saw coming. Funny thing is, I didn't wake up that morning looking for a fight. I just wanted cars to slow down for my grandkids. My name's Richard Hale. I'm 59, retired electrician, spent most of my life wiring houses and fixing problems nobody else wanted to deal with. And these days I live quiet on the edge of a town outside Asheville, North Carolina. Not exactly the kind of guy who goes around picking battles, but I've learned over the years that if you let people walk over you once, they'll keep doing it until there's nothing left to walk on. Now behind my place, there's this narrow stretch of asphalt, about 20 feet wide, runs maybe 130 feet long. Not much to look at, just a strip of road I had paved years back so I could get my truck through easier. But here's the thing. That little strip connects directly to a gated community called Brook Hollow Estates. About 200 homes, big houses, neat lawns, HOA rules thicker than a phone book. And for nearly a decade, those folks had been using my road like it was theirs. Nobody ever came and asked permission, not properly anyway. It just sort of happened. One neighbor started cutting through, then another. Then suddenly, it was the main back entrance for the whole community. At first, I didn't mind. Truth is, I kind of liked the idea that something I built made life easier for people. I'm wired that way, always have been. But weekends changed things. My daughter would drop off my two grandkids, Ellie and Marcus, 8 and 6, full of energy, the kind that turns any open space into a playground. They'd ride their bikes up and down that road, chalk drawings all over the pavement, laughing like the world hadn't taught them anything bad yet. And that road, my road, became their little kingdom. Only problem was, drivers didn't treat it like a place kids might be. They treated it like a shortcut. Cars would come flying through, not crazy fast, but fast enough that it made me uneasy. You know that feeling, when something hasn't gone wrong yet, but you can see how easily it could. So I did what seemed reasonable. I went down to the hardware store, picked up a bright yellow sign. Slow, children at play. Nothing fancy, just clear and visible. I planted it right near the entrance where cars turned in from the main road. And for a while it worked. People slowed down, waved sometimes, even smiled at the kids. It felt like one of those small wins that make life feel decent. Then came Melissa Carter. Melissa was the HOA president over at Brook Hollow. Mid-40s, always dressed sharp, the kind of person who speaks like every sentence is already pre-approved. I'd seen her around a few times, always walking like she had somewhere more important to be. One afternoon, I got a letter in my mailbox, certified. That alone told me everything I needed to know. I opened it at the kitchen counter, and there it was, formal tone, legal language, and right in the middle of it a demand. Remove the sign within 5 days. Reason? It did not conform to the visual standards of their community. I remember just standing there for a second, letter in hand, reading that line over again, not because I didn't understand it, but because I couldn't quite believe the nerve of it. Their community, my road. So I walked over there the next morning. Caught Melissa near the front gate. She was talking to someone about landscaping or something equally important in HOA world. I waited until she finished, then stepped in. Morning, I said, holding up the letter. This yours? She looked at it, then at me. Polite smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Yes, Mr. Hale. We've had a few complaints. Complaints about kids being safe? It's about maintaining consistency, she said, like she'd practiced that line. Your sign doesn't match our neighborhood's aesthetic. I let out a short laugh, couldn't help it. That sign's on my property. She tilted her head slightly, still smiling. The road affects our residents. Yeah, I said. It keeps them from driving an extra 6 miles. That smile tightened just a bit. I'd appreciate your cooperation, she said. I'd appreciate you leaving my stuff alone, I replied. There was a pause, just long enough to feel the shift. She looked at me like I'd just become a problem. Well, she said finally, we'll revisit this if necessary. And just like that, conversation over. 3 days later, I came outside in the morning, coffee in hand, expecting to see that bright yellow sign standing where it always did. It wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe it got knocked over, maybe a storm took it, but then I saw it. In my trash can, bent slightly, dirt on the edges, like someone had gone out of their way to make a point. And right then, something in me changed. Not anger, not right away, more like clarity. Because now it wasn't about a sign. It was about someone deciding they had the right to touch what wasn't theirs, and expecting me to just accept it. I set my coffee down, picked that sign up, brushed it off slowly, and I remember thinking, real clear. All right, if they want to play this game, we're going to play it properly. That afternoon, I pulled out the original deed from when I bought the place back in '98, yellowed paper, but still solid. Then I called up the county office and ordered a fresh survey. If this was going to turn into something, I wanted everything clean, documented, undeniable. And while I was digging through old files, I found something else, an email printout from years back. Melissa's name on it. Subject line, temporary access appreciation. I sat there for a second, reading it again, and this time I smiled. Because now, this wasn't just personal. This was leverage. And I knew exactly what I was going to do next. So once I found that email, everything kind of snapped into focus, like suddenly I wasn't just some old guy arguing over a sign. I was holding proof that this whole setup, the way they'd been using my road all these years, was never official. It was borrowed, quietly, conveniently, and forgotten the moment it became useful to forget. The survey came back 3 days later. Clean, clear, undeniable. That strip of asphalt, every inch of it, sat entirely on my land. No shared access, no easement, no handshake agreement that held any legal weight, just 9 years of people driving across it like it belonged to them. I spread the papers out on my kitchen table that night, deed on one side, survey on the other, and that printed email right in the middle like a missing puzzle piece finally found. And I remember just sitting there, running my hand across the edge of the table, thinking about all those weekends, all those cars speeding past my grandkids, all those times I let it slide because it felt neighborly, and how quickly neighborly turned into entitled. Now here's the thing about me. I don't rush decisions. Spent too many years in electrical work to act without thinking, because one wrong move and something shorts out, sometimes worse, so I gave it a night. Slept on it. Next morning, I called a lawyer. Name's Daniel Brooks. Calm guy, doesn't talk more than he needs to. I laid everything out for him, from the sign to the letter to the removal, and when I mentioned the email, he went quiet for a second. Do you have that in writing? He asked. Printed and sitting in front of me. Another pause. Then they've been using your property without a formal easement, he said. Which means you have options. Like what? Well, he said, you can shut it down entirely, or you can negotiate from a position they didn't realize you had. I leaned back in my chair, looked out the window at that road, quiet at that hour, just sitting there like it always had. What happens if I close it? I asked. He didn't answer right away. They won't like it, he said finally. And depending on how dependent they are on that access, it could get messy. Messy. I almost laughed. It's already messy, I said. We talked a bit longer, went over the details, and before we hung up, he said something that stuck with me. If you're going to do this, Richard, do it clean. No gray areas. Paper everything. That was all I needed. By the end of the week, I had a crew out there. Not a big team, just a couple guys I trusted. We measured the entrance, dug in posts, and installed a solid steel gate, about 16 feet across. Nothing fancy, but strong, clean lines, painted black. The kind of gate that doesn't ask permission, it just stands there and says no. Added an electronic lock too, keypad access, remote control from inside the house, and 2 cameras, one facing in, one facing out. If this was going to turn into something, I wanted eyes on it. While they were working, a few residents from Brook Hollow slowed their cars, rolled down windows, curious, confused. One guy leaned out and said, "Hey, what's going on with the gate?" I wiped my hands on a rag, walked over a bit. "Private property," I said, "just making it official." He frowned. "We use this road." I nodded. "I know. And you won't be, for now." You could see it hit him. That slow realization that something they'd taken for granted was about to disappear. "Man, that's gonna add like 20 minutes to my commute," he said. I shrugged slightly. "Might want to talk to your HOA about that." That word, HOA, it always lands heavier than it sounds. By that afternoon, the gate was up, and that night, I locked it. Then I sent the letter. Certified, just like hers. Inside it, copies of everything, deed, survey, and that email she probably forgot existed. I kept the wording simple, no drama, no insults, just facts. The road is private property. There is no easement. Access is revoked effective immediately. If they wish to discuss future use, they could do so through legal channels. That was it. No threats. No negotiation yet. Just a line drawn. It took about 6 hours. That's how long it took for the phone to start ringing. First call came around dinner time. Number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. Then another. By the fourth call, I picked up. Mr. Hale, a voice said, tense, controlled. Yes. This is Melissa Carter. Of course it was. What exactly do you think you're doing? She asked. I leaned back in my chair, phone to my ear, looking out at that gate, standing there under the porch light. I believe I made that clear in the letter. You cannot block access to our community. I can block access to my property, I said calmly. Which is what I've done. There was a sharp exhale on the other end. This is going to create serious issues, she said. Emergency services. That sounds like something you should have thought about before removing my property. Silence. Then her voice came back, tighter now. If this isn't resolved immediately, we will take legal action. I couldn't help it. I smiled a little. You should do what you feel is necessary, I said. My attorney's ready. That ended the call. But it didn't end the situation. Because by the next morning, things started to ripple. Neighbors stuck at the gate, trying codes that didn't exist. Cars backing up, turning around, frustration building. Word spread fast. By noon, Daniel called me. They're scrambling, he said. And they've already mentioned legal action. I figured. I've drafted a response, he continued. 9 years of unauthorized use. We're putting that at about $2 million in damages. I let that sit for a second. Think that'll get their attention? It already has. And it did. Because later that day, Melissa showed up at my driveway. Didn't call ahead this time. She stepped out of her car, sunglasses on, posture stiff, like she was walking into a meeting she didn't want to lose. I walked out to meet her. You've made your point, she said, skipping the greeting. Now open the gate. I shook my head slightly. That's not how this works anymore. You're putting people at risk, she snapped. Fire trucks, ambulances. No, I said, cutting in, voice still even. You did that when you chose convenience over doing things properly. Her jaw tightened. This is harassment, she said. This is ownership, I replied. Another pause, longer this time. Then she said something quieter. What do you want? And there it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. Just negotiation. I looked at her for a moment, really looked this time. Not as the HOA president, not as the person who laughed at me. Just someone who had finally realized she wasn't in control of this situation anymore. We can talk, I said. But not like this. She frowned. What does that mean? It means lawyers, I said. Contracts. Terms. The way it should have been done 9 years ago. She didn't like that. I could see it. Because paperwork means accountability, and accountability means you can't just make things disappear. We don't have time for that, she said. I glanced past her, toward the road, toward that gate. Looks like you're gonna have to make time. She stood there for another second, like she wanted to argue more, push harder, but there wasn't anywhere to push. Because for the first time since this started, the control wasn't hers. She got back in her car without another word, drove off, and for a brief moment, everything went quiet again. But not for long, because 2 days later, something happened that turned this from a legal dispute into something a whole lot bigger. 2 days after that conversation, I was sitting on the back porch early evening, just watching the light drop behind the trees, that quiet hour where everything slows down a bit. And I remember thinking maybe this whole thing would settle into a legal back and forth. Paperwork, negotiations, nothing dramatic, just time and signatures. Then I heard the sirens. Distant at first, then louder, then closer, but not in the way they should have been. You can tell, if you've lived somewhere long enough, when emergency vehicles are taking the direct route. It's fast, sharp, purposeful. This sounded different. Longer, drawn out. I stood up, walked toward the edge of the property where I could see past the trees toward Brook Hollow. And after a minute, I saw smoke. Not heavy black smoke. Not at first. More like a gray plume, steady, rising just above the rooftops. And right then, I felt it, that uneasy twist in your gut when something's not lining up the way it should. The fire trucks didn't come through my road. They couldn't. So they had to go the long way, looping around the main highway, cutting through 2 intersections, adding miles where there used to be yards. I didn't time it, but later, I found out. 15 minutes. That's how much longer it took them to get there. By the time they arrived, the situation had changed. What could have been contained to a kitchen had spread. Fire doesn't wait for paperwork. By that night, the news had already picked it up. Local station, small crew, they showed footage of the house, 48 Willow Creek Lane, front half blackened, windows blown out, hoses stretched across the yard, and a family standing on the sidewalk, wrapped in blankets, looking like they were still trying to understand how their life had just shifted in a matter of minutes. They said initial damage estimates were around $12,000 if it had been handled quickly, but it wasn't. It climbed to over $160,000. And the part that stuck with me most, there was a little girl, 7 years old. She kept holding on to this stuffed animal while firefighters moved around her, like that was the one thing she refused to let go of. They had to relocate for months. Everything paused. Now I'm going to be honest here, because there's no point telling a story like this if you skip over the parts that don't make you look good. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I thought I was wrong. I knew exactly why I did what I did, and legally, I was on solid ground. But life's not always about what's legal. It's about what connects. And for the first time since I locked that gate, I started asking myself a harder question. Not was I allowed to do it, but what did it cost? Morning came, and with it, everything else. News vans showed up. Not a lot, just enough. One of them had drone footage, and that's where things shifted again. Because from above, it was obvious. My road cut the distance from the nearest hydrant down to less than 300 feet. Without it, they were pulling water from nearly half a mile away. That's not just inconvenience. That's time. And time, in a fire, is everything. The story spread fast after that. Not just about the fire, but about the access. About the missing easement. About 9 years of a community operating on something that was never officially theirs. And then came the lawsuits. 21 families filed against the HOA. Negligence. Failure to secure proper emergency access. Failure to document what should have been documented. The fire marshal got involved, issued fines, around $30,000 total for code violations tied to emergency planning. Insurance companies stepped in next. Premiums didn't just go up, they jumped. Over 200% for some homeowners. That's the kind of number that changes how people feel real quick. And then, the part nobody saw coming. Turns out, the house that caught fire belonged to Melissa's daughter, and her grandson was inside that night. They made it out safe, thankfully, but safe doesn't mean unchanged. When that came out, everything flipped. The board held an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, didn't need to. Word travels fast in places like that. 6 votes to 1. She was out. Just like that. The same person who told me my sign didn't fit their aesthetic had built an entire situation that didn't fit reality. 2 days later, I got another call. Different tone this time. Mr. Hale, this is Thomas Green. I've recently been appointed acting president of the Brook Hollow HOA. Calm voice. Measured. Already a better start. I'd like to meet, he said. We need to resolve this. I looked out at the gate again, still locked, still quiet. All right, I said. Let's talk. We met at my place. No suits, no posturing, just 2 men sitting at a wooden table with a situation neither of us could ignore. I'm not here to argue, he said. I'm here to fix what should have been handled years ago. I nodded. That makes 2 of us. And for the first time since this all began, the conversation wasn't about control. It was about terms. I laid it out clearly. 10-year easement. $1,600 a month for access. They cover all maintenance related to the road. Legal fees, reimbursed in full. But more than that, I added conditions. Because trust, once it's broken, doesn't come back without structure. Miss a payment, even by a day, access shuts down for 72 hours. $5,000 penalty. Any damage to the property, rates double. Permanently. And the signs my signs. Stay? Not just the original one. 2 more. Placed where I decide. Maintained at their expense. He listened to all of it, didn't interrupt. Just took a breath when I finished. That's firm, he said. It's fair, I replied. He nodded slowly. I'll take it to the board. 48 hours later, they signed. No negotiation. No pushback. Because at that point, they weren't negotiating from convenience anymore. They were negotiating from consequence. The gate opened again. Not as a favor. As a contract. Couple weeks after that, I saw the new signs go up. Bright, visible, impossible to ignore. Cars slowed down again. Kids rode their bikes. Life adjusted. As for Melissa, She reached out separately, wanted to settle her portion of things, personal liability, they called it. $3,000. We handled it quick. 6 months later, she moved out. New family moved into that house on Willow Creek. Fresh start, I guess. Now sometimes, I sit out here in the evenings, same porch, same view, and I watch those cars pass by a little slower than they used to. And I think about how something small, a sign, a simple request, turned into all of this. So here's the question I keep coming back to. Where exactly did this go wrong? Was it when they took the sign down? When I locked the gate? Or years before, when nobody bothered to make things official? Because depending on how you look at it, everybody was right, and everybody was wrong. So I'm curious what you think. If you were in my position, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd think.